There's so much information out there, and if you've watched enough of my channel, you've probably learned much more than you can reasonably put into practice. It's true that knowledge can give you tons of advantages over your opponents, but the problem is the ability to recall that knowledge at the right time. The main reason we find it hard to strategize during the game is due to issues with multitasking. Even though it's called multitasking, you're still only able to do one thing at a time. For example, when pushing a deer with your scout and bringing in a boar with a villager at the same time, you have to jump between the two tasks in order to do them both successfully at the same time. Splitting these tasks into parts that require your input or attention, and parts that happen automatically, is very important. For the deer push, you have to move your scout near the deer and then wait for the deer to move to the next location. Since the only action that requires your input is having to move the scout, as soon as you move the scout, you have a few seconds to do something else before you have to jump back to the scout to move it again. During these few seconds, you can make sure the path is clear for your boar luring villager by moving your sheep out of the way, get your villagers under your town center to shoot the boar, or garrison your luring villager, depending on the stage at which you're at in the luring process. Once you've done the actions that require your input, then you're free to jump back to the scout to resume pushing the deer. This all has to happen very quickly, as you need to continue pushing the deer, otherwise there's a chance it'll go back to its starting location. This level of multitasking should be doable by upper intermediate players, so if you're around 1600 elo and you aren't confident in your ability to push deer and lure boar at the same time, then you should definitely consider doing some single player practice. In real-time strategy games, good multitasking ability is something that you must develop in order to compete at a higher level. That said, even if your goal doesn't involve going pro, and you just want to improve for the sake of improvement, multitasking as a concept is something that you should be thinking about. Now, as I said in our deer pushing example, you can only really do one thing at a time. It really comes down to knowing when the current thing that you're doing doesn't require your attention anymore. Prioritization is one thing that influences when you need to stop focusing on one thing and focus on something else. A good example of this is when you sneak some archers into an opponent's woodline and you want to kill as many villagers as possible. Normally in feudal age, you want to jump back to your town center as soon as you have 60 wood so you can make a farm with a straggler tree villager. Usually spending that 60 wood on a farm is the optimal play, but sometimes there's something else that you just have to prioritize instead. If you have archers in an enemy woodline, microing your units can lead to more kills than if you just let your units sit and shoot while you add farms. In this situation, you'll want to kill as many villagers as possible before going back to your base and adding farms. This is usually a good prioritization of your time, but of course you don't want to get too tunnel visioned here and miss the opponent counterattacking at the same time. In order to be able to react on time here, you need to be able to do your archer micro while also keeping an eye on the minimap. It doesn't take much time to take a glance at the minimap, but knowing the best timing to do so will allow you to micro effectively while also being alert to things that are happening on the minimap. The timing in which you don't need to control your units is after you shoot, then issue a movement command while your archers are reloading. This short period of time is when you can do something else before you need to jump back to your archers to shoot again. Archers have a very fast attack speed, so it's really difficult to do this perfectly, which is why there's a lot of variation in the ability to micro archers, even at the top level. The key takeaway here is to move on to something else as soon as your attention isn't required for a certain task anymore. Knowing at which point you can jump to another task is dependent on the situation, but there's something that's even more important than multitasking ability, and that's to be able to do individual actions quickly. From here, I'm going to show you my favorite method to work on specific sequences of actions. If you can do things as fast as possible and with confidence, then the times when you can jump to another task will reveal themselves naturally. First, I should let you know that I learned the game the hard way, grinding out games for the past 7 years or so after playing StarCraft 2 for 4 or 5 years competitively before that. This has given me a ton of experience in a lot of situations, which has naturally improved my ability over time. If you don't want to spend a decade to become competent at the game, then you'll want to use your time more efficiently. One of the best ways to do that is to play single player against AI. Well, you don't even really need to set an AI for the most part, as you're mostly playing the game against yourself until you get to a high level, in which case the AI isn't even a challenge at all. When I say play single player, I don't mean just grind out games from start to finish either. I mean practice specific things over and over by using saves to reset exactly where you want to practice. This concept is used in any sport, or even when playing music. You might practice hitting a ball against a wall thousands of times if you want to improve the accuracy of your shot in tennis, or you might practice the same difficult passage when playing piano in order to master it. The same concept applies to Age of Empires. If you want to practice late Dark Age after you have the initial 6 sheep and 3 wood resource distribution, you can make a save here and then reload it from this spot as many times as you want. If you're practicing a Men-at-Arms Archers build order, you might want to make a save just before you reach Feudal Age so you can remember to get the Men-at-Arms upgrade, Double Bit Axe, and Archery range. Then the Mining Camp, and then the Blacksmith, while also queuing Archers and Villagers and not getting housed, while also microing your Men-at-Arms and Scout Cavalry at the opponent's base. Oh, and you also need to add farms and react to your opponent's counterattack too. Until you can do all of this with a high level of confidence, drilling it in single player is the fastest way to improve. I can guarantee that if you're around 1300 ELO and you go through early Feudal Age a few times in single player before queuing for ladder, you'll feel like the game got a whole lot easier. Saving and reloading isn't limited to single player either. If you have a practice partner, you can utilize this same method when you want to practice in a more realistic environment. Saving just before reaching Feudal Age so that you can replay the same feudal could be a very efficient way to improve your unit control while managing your economy, as you could come up with exactly what you want to do with your villagers, which will free up your mental resources for microing units. Reducing the randomness factor will also allow you to focus on things that are consistent, like building units, not getting housed, and adding farms. Another great time to save and replay is just before taking a big fight. You can practice different ways to micro, and if it ends up being a really bad fight for one player, you can reload before that fight and continue without taking the fight. You're really only limited by your imagination with this method of practice. To save the game, you just have to go to the menu and then click Save Game. Then give it a name. Reloading a single player game is simple. Just go to Load Game and then open the game that you want. For multiplayer, it's a bit different. You save the game in the same way, but to reload it, you have to go to Restore Game in the multiplayer menu. This will create a new lobby in which the players that were in the previous game can join. Once all players have joined the lobby and readied up, you can start the game and it'll resume from where you save. And that's it. I greatly encourage you to use this practice method, and I'm sure you'll feel the difference it makes quickly.